Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the May 8th, 2023 meeting of the University City Council to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Clay,
Present.
Councilmember Klein,
Here.
Councilmember McMahon,
Here.
Councilmember Hales,
Here.
Councilmember Fuller,
Here.
Councilmember Smotherson,
Here.
Mayor Crowe.
Here. Before you, you have the agenda. During the study session, the city manager asked that we move item K1 from the consent agenda to item L5 on the city manager's report. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to amend the agenda as per the city manager's request? Motion made by Mr. McMahon. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Hales. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Now you have before you the amended agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Motion made by Mr. McMahon. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Klein. Is there a discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We have no proclamations. Before you, you have the minutes of the April 24th, 2023 session. Is there a motion to approve? Motion made by Mr. Hales. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. McMahon. Is there discussion? I will abstain as I was not here. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. McMahon.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to take the opportunity to nominate Tim Schroeder to the Urban Forestry Commission.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Hales. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We have no swearing in this evening, and I think that everyone is wanting to speak on an agenda item or at the public hearing. But for everyone is in the audience, because we do have a larger crowd, more so than normal, there are sign-up sheets over in the corner, and you can sign up to speak on either agenda items or non-agenda items. And when you come to the microphone, those of you who have signed up to speak, please press the bottom button on the microphone and then give your name and address, and you will have 5 minutes to give your remarks, and then we will move forward. So if there are no citizen participation comments at this time, are there any council comments at this time? Hearing none, we will move forward to the public hearing. We do have 4 requests to speak. Ms. Reese, did we have any requests any comments given to us prior to noon today?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. I will open this public hearing at 6:36 p.m. And we have several requests to speak. I will give the requests, present them to you in the order they were given to me. First up is Brad Gose. Please give your name and address. And the button is at the bottom on the center. There we go.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Brad Goss. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Amundsen Davis, and I represent a group of homeowners in the University Heights No. 2 subdivision who are here tonight while you consider the text amendment that's before you to amend your zoning code. This text amendment is intended, as we understand it, to allow Washington University to undertake certain redevelopment on 6900 Washington and 6901 Delmar. The staff report December 14th, 2022. And by the way, I did provide a handout. That's why that was given to you, so that you can follow me if you are able, as I could not use PowerPoint. The staff report on December 14th, 2022 made a specific comment that the council was delaying consideration of the text amendment pending consideration of all of the additional details concerning the Washington University plan and the conditional use permit. Section 400.2600 of the city's code requires some very specific things be submitted to the city, in particular, a lighting plan, stormwater plan, a detailed signage plan, and a landscaping plan. Your staff does not have those. Your Planning and Zoning Commission did not have those. And so when they considered this plan and the conditional use permit, they didn't have all of the information they required, nor does the council. And we would respectfully ask that this text amendment be delayed so that you be able to fully consider those things. In addition, this text amendment, which is amending section 400.700A1, is saying that lots may be as small as 0.45 acres in the public activity and historic district. And the intention is this will allow WashU to proceed with its project. However, you have an issue. Section 400.690 of your code specifically says educational institutional uses must have lots of 3 acres or greater in size. You are not amending that. So when you amend this text amendment, our position will be that Washington University's project still has to take place on each lot of 3 acres or more in size. The text amendment also that you're considering, we went back and looked at the comprehensive plans the city has adopted for 1985, 1999, and 2005. And they're pretty illuminating. The 1985 master plan, which was prepared by Christner Partnership, among others, specifically stated that with respect to parking, it's recommended that future parking requirements be viewed in a district-wide context with liberal interpretation of the existing zoning parking regulations, where proposed uses can share existing parking facilities with district institutions to avoid impacting local neighborhoods. The WashU plan doesn't do that. In fact, the staff report suggests just to the contrary. We think that comprehensive plan is still in effect and is some good, has a lot of wisdom. The 1985 civic master plan also said, with respect to this site, that the open space on Trinity that the WashU plan says will become a parking lot because they're trying to comply with staff, quote, is an important community resource and should be preserved. And that language and that plan has been reapproved by this city on 2 subsequent master plans. There's also a detailed landscaping plan in the 1985 master plan that is not being followed by the WashU plan. In the 1999 plan, the city noted that residential neighborhoods are a precious resource to be preserved, maintained, and they should be conserved by the city in order to produce high quality, long lasting neighborhoods and developments and preserve property values. And I refer you to the goals and policies of that master plan. The 1999 plan again reiterated those goals, and like the 1999 plan also went back and said, we're endorsing everything that was in the 1985 master plan. So council went back roughly 14 years later and said, yeah, the comprehensive plan from 1985, it makes sense to us and we think it should be followed. They also had some strategies in the 99 plan. They said that development proposals in existing residential neighborhoods, that includes the Washington University proposal, will require the submission of a 3-dimensional massing model. The 3-dimensional massing model will include the buildings in the proposed development, as well as all adjacent and contiguous buildings within 185 feet of the proposed development boundary. And the model will indicate the exact geographical relationship among all the buildings. That's not been followed with the proposal that's before you tonight, or be before you when the comprehensive, when that CUP comes before you. The comprehensive plan update of 2005, once again, look back at the prior comprehensive plans. And in that 2005 comprehensive plan, they noted that the goals of the 1995 comprehensive plan update were valid, and they again endorsed them. And
Mr. Goss, your time is winding down.
thank you so much, because I'm about wound down as well. And so what I'd respectfully ask this council to do is to table this tonight. As there are a lot of issues with it, we'd like to have the opportunity to have a dialogue. I respectfully request that the council do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next request to speak is Davis Sandell.
Good evening, Dave Sandel, 6910 Washington Avenue. I've sent all of you a copy of this. I didn't have a copy to bring with me tonight. Parking Solutions Committee, WashU CUP. For the last several months, there's been a wide variety of conversations taking place about the proposed purchase of 6900 Delmar and 6901 Washington Avenue. For example, there have been many individual conversations, smaller group conversations, and conversations at various U City commissions. This has consumed a lot of time and energy for all participants. However, during the same time frame, our subdivision has failed to pull together an inclusive community conversation and action plan that we can all review and vote on. The purpose of the Parking Solution Committee is to act as our committee, which attempts to work outside of local neighborhood politics and agenda and provide residents with the information they need to evaluate various parking solutions and then arrange for a vote. The committee would be comprised of residents who seek to identify the best parking solutions, rank them by simple yet appropriate criteria, and include provisions for making any changes, and then present them to our subdivision. Then, when we're ready, arrange for a vote. Parking Solutions Committee might also propose that a particular parking solution be staged as a simple pilot to gather more realistic operating data and scenario information. Later, the committee would also welcome the trustees to arrange for the time and location for a final vote. In this document, I list some various examples. Keep in mind, this is not meant to be a lengthy process, in fact, quite the opposite. The committee seeks to simplify the process, collect and rank ideas and suggestions, use common sense where applicable, and most importantly, communicate with everyone. To that end, I've taken the liberty to socialize this approach with 4 other subdivision residents on Kingsbury, Washington Avenue, and Delmar. The response has been very positive. Other residents are welcome to join the committee. Thank you very much. I welcome your comments, and I believe if this is thoughtfully integrated into the CUP, it could be quite effective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next request to speak is Ben Ellerman. You were already on. Heard my guy, please. Thank you.
Sorry. Ben Ellerman, 6911 Washington Avenue. I'm just speaking for myself and a number of the residents, just to say that we have a number of concerns about this text amendment, mainly the density of what's being proposed and the current solutions. Hopefully a solution could come forward that would be good for the residents and everyone involved. But currently we feel that it's too dense, the loss of green space, not protecting the parking on our street. There are a lot of issues, and we hope to work through those, but we definitely want to just pass along that feedback. And I thank you for your time.
Our last person who has asked to speak during the public hearing is Ruth Decker.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I stand here in opposition to the text
May I have
amendment.
your address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Ruth Decker, 6900 Washington Avenue. That's at the corner of Trinity and Washington. I stand here in opposition to the text amendment that aims to amend the zoning requirement in the public activity district. This action is taken solely to facilitate Washington University's current and future acquisitions of yet more properties in University City. Passage of this bill will allow a very dense use in an extremely small area with little regard for the concerns of the surrounding homeowners, especially those that live near the structure. The current proposal, as you know, involves the sale of the church property at 6901 Washington, right across from my home. The transfer of the property will cause more chaos to an already saturated intersection, plus undesirable traffic and parking loads in what is now a private street. Ultimately, it will change the character and charm of the entire district, and we really do not want to become the Trinity campus of the Washington University. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no other requests to speak, the public hearing is now closed at 6:47 p.m. We'll now move forward on the agenda to the consent agenda. Please note that item number 1 has been moved. So items K 2 through 10 on the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion made by Mr. McMahon. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Fuller. Is there discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Now move forward to the city manager's report. Mr. Rose.
Honorable Mayor and council members, this first item up under item L1, ask that you receive a report from our auditors on the FY 2022 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report and Audit Report and provide, accept the report and provide any direction that you may have. Mr. Cole, would you like to introduce our auditor?
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Honorable Mayor and members of council. As annual required by the charter that we have a annual audit. And this year, this is for FY 22. And we've been engaged with accounting firm Sikich, and we have Mike Williams here tonight as a partner to present the report.
Thank you, Keith. Again, my name is Mike Williams. I'm a partner at Sikich. I'll just go ahead and jump into the reports. I'm gonna self comfortable. We've issued several reports that look like this in paper form. So what I'd like to do is just kind of hit some of the highlights in these reports, let you ask questions as we go through, or questions at the end is fine too. There's a report on federal awards. There's a report on other communication. There's another board report. But what I was going to start with is this report. It's commonly called the ACFR, the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. And again, what I was going to do is just flip through here and hit some of the highlights related to the audit. So past the table of contents, the first thing is a transmittal letter. It's on city letterhead. It's dated March 24th, 2023. So this is a transmittal letter that transmits the information in the report, provides a lot of other information that a lot of like standard reports don't have. A lot of standard reports just have a balance sheet and P&L notes. But this has a transmittal letter that has a lot of good information, including things like economic condition and outlook, management controls, budgetary controls, information about the audit. So that's the transmittal letter. There's also a list of principal city officials, an org chart, and after that, then there's a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting. So I think that's good to note. So congratulations to the city on that. But I think it just communicates to the board and citizens, users of the statements, that the city is providing a high level of accountability and transparency for its financial information. After that, then we get into the financial section of the audit. So yeah, the real numbers. The first part of that is our independent auditors report. It's on our Sikich letterhead. And for those who are connoisseurs of independent auditors report, you can notice that this is a little bit different than in the prior years. There was a lot of new audit standards that took place during this fiscal year. So this report just looks different, but the bottom line is it still has well, just to talk about it here, the first paragraph says, we have audited the financial statements. And the second paragraph, I think, is the important one, which is the actual opinion of the auditors. And it says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. So there's no significant deficiencies, no material weaknesses, or no material weaknesses or related to the findings in the report. So that's good. But the opinion now is listed first rather than kind of buried in the middle of the report. So that's the new opinion. And to get into the financial information, page 5 begins the management's discussion and analysis. And I was going to go ahead and jump to page 7 and 9 of that. There's information in here related to financial highlights and some other general information for the city, but the bottom of page 7 gives a big picture financial summary. I think it's has all the governmental funds, the business type activities, the total amounts for the city, and the governmental activities are things like primarily the general fund, the main operating fund of the city. The business type activities, those are the type of funds the city has that are funded by charges for services, fees, things like that, which are I think parking and solid waste and one of the other ones. So. And then there's a total. So just on the right side of the page, we can see the total assets for the city are around 88,258,000 compared to around 83 million the prior year, an increase of 4.8 million. There's some deferred amounts, but the liabilities we can see increase from around 25,992,000 to around 56 million. The big change on that is the amounts for the TIF note that were issued during the year, similar to the prior year. And then there's the bottom line is net position. So in a government, we don't call it retained earnings, we call it net position. And so this shows that the net position went from 20,105,000 last year, around 6,533,000 this year. A reduction of around 13 million. Again, it's primarily related to the issuance of that one TIF note for, as I mentioned, for the TIF. So repeat that. All right. So anyway, so that's the balance sheet. That's the balances this year compared to the balances last year. Page 9 then is a summary of the revenues and expenses. So the revenues and expenses are an operating summary over a time period. Again, we have governmental activities, business type activities, and totals. And we can see on the right side of the page, the total increase or decrease for the year. We can see a decrease from around 41,655,000 to around 40,153,000. And primarily the changes are related to various grants that the city has. We have operating grants, and then we also have a new intergovernmental grant. So some larger fluctuations related to grants, but grants do have a tendency to fluctuate a lot. You get a grant one year, you don't have it the next year. And then we can see the expenses. Again, the big picture expense summary shows that expenses decreased for the year from around 77 million to around 53 million. And again, it's primarily the planning and development note that was issued. And then it reconciles to net position at the bottom of the page. So that's just the big picture summary of all the funds blended together on a full accrual basis, including all the debt, all the capital assets this year compared to the previous year. So to get into some more of the detail, the first financial statements begin on page 15 and 16. But I was going to jump to page 17. So page 17 then is the balance sheet for the governmental activities. So I like to review the general fund, the main operating fund of the city. It shows the general fund total assets at the top of the page, around 24,503,000. A considerable amount of that is the cash and investments for the year. There's also other receivables and other assets. Well, the liabilities at June 30th amounted to around 2,132,000. There's some deferred amounts. And again, the difference between all the assets and liabilities and deferred amounts in this page is called fund balance. So sometimes you're interested in what your fund balance is. The general fund balance shows a total of around 21,311,000. But then part of that is non-spendable, part of it's committed, part of it's assigned, and then the remaining unassigned fund balance is around 14,310,000. So anyway, I think that's an important number to monitor from year to year. And you can see the information for the other funds on the page. There's a public safety sales tax fund, the Olive I-70 TIF fund, and that other governmental funds is all the smaller funds are all detailed out in the back of the report. Anyway, so jumping then to page 19, page 17 was the balance sheet. Again, that's a snapshot in a point of time. Page 19 is the summary of the revenues and expenditures. So over a time period. We can see the general fund revenues, the first column of numbers around 24,075,000, expenses around 26,303,000. And then there's other financing sources and uses around 5 million. So the increase for the fund balance for the general fund are around that 2,888,000 on there. So that's the general fund big picture summary of the revenues, expenses. We can also see the balances for the other funds on the page. All right. So those are the governmental activities. The enterprise fund activities begin on page 21. And again, these are the parking garage, golf course, solid waste funds, funds that are primarily financed with charges for services. The balance sheet is on page 21, but I was going to talk a little bit about page 22. We have a comment further in the back related to one of these, the parking garage. If you look at the third from the bottom line, it's called the change in net position, which is similar to net income for regular companies. We can see that in the solid waste column, the change in net position is a negative 993,000, which brought the net position from negative 1,042,000 to negative 2,036,000. So So we have a comment in the back related to the funding of that fund in the future. Okay, then there's a cash flow statement on pages 23 and 24. Let's see, page 25 and 26 is the summary of the pension trust funds. There's 2 pension trust funds of the city, the uniform and non-uniformed employees. So there's more detail on that further in the back. Page 27 begins the summary of the significant accounting policies. So I won't talk about those a whole lot. They go through page 36. And on page 36, we begin the cash investment note. And we have been emphasizing the note B1 on deposits. So it says deposits, but those are like cash in the bank deposits, which are important because of certain banks that have had liquidity problems. So if you're cash in the bank, there's a state law that says that you have to have your cash in the bank secured either by FDIC or other pledged collateral. So the middle paragraph that does say the city's bank balances are entirely insured or collateralized. So extra meaning to that comment this year. Let's see, note B2 then is a summary of the investments for the city. You can see those. I don't think there's anything too different about that. That's cash and investment note, capital assets begin on page 39. And capital assets are important because these are large dollar capital items that depreciate over time generally. So you want to see if they're depreciating potentially faster than you're replacing those types of assets. The governmental activities are on page 39 and the business type activities are on page 40. Page 41, then we get into the long-term debt, and long-term debt's important because this is like the mortgage on your house, the long-term payments that are required to be paid into the future. So that there's a summary schedule for that on page 41. And the terms for all the different debt are on the next several pages. So that goes through page 43. Page 43, then we get into the employee benefit retirement plans. And I like this schedule on page 43. It does give a summary of the non-uniform employees retirement fund and the police retirement fund. So it gives there's a column there for each one of those. And the lines say total pension liability and planned fiduciary net position. So the total plan liability, that's similar to the actuarial calculation of the future liability of those plans. And that planned fiduciary net position, that's the net assets currently available to pay those future liabilities. So we can see in both cases, in both of the funds, that there is more liability than there is current assets or to pay for that. So we can see that total amount is around $16 million. And that below that is a percentage coverage of around 83% for one and 70% for the other. All right, so I think that's about all is going to hit for the highlights for the pension funds. There's a lot more information on those for the next 10 pages or so. And then page 56 begins the post-employment benefits other than pensions. So if there's other post-employment, which is after somebody is no longer with the city, if there's other benefits available to record those and calculate that. So there's a schedule of that on page 57. At the bottom of page 57, there's a change in, we call it OPEB liability, which is other post-employment benefits. And that shows about $1 million liability for those other type of liabilities. So that schedule's on here. After that, page 59 gets into interfund amounts. Page 60 is risk management, which is insurance. 61 relates to contingencies and commitments. Note J, negative net position. Again, that's related to the solid waste fund disclosure of accumulated deficit. And also similar to prior years, we've got tax abatements, economic development loans. Oh, one of the new things this year too was leases. So accounting standards now require that the lease liabilities and lease receivables be recorded on the financial report. So there's a calculation related to these lessor leases included here, which is the real estate leases the city has with a couple of retail establishments. So that's a new disclosure this year. Note N relates to the flood damage and FEMA reimbursements. Note O is future accounting pronouncement, or that's the accounting principle changes, adoption of the new accounting standards. And note P then is the future accounting pronouncements coming up. So that's all the financial statements and the notes to the financial statements. After that, then we get into required supplemental information and statistical information. I wasn't going to talk much about that, but just to give you, for instance, on page 67 begins the detail related to the budget, the original budget for the year, the final budget for the year, the actual revenues and expenses for the year, and then the difference between the final budget and the actual revenues expenses. So the total revenues are on the top of page 68, which shows that the city's under budget by around 711,000. And this is just the general fund. Total expenses, you can see that detail goes through page 71. And expenses are around 1,163,000 under budget for the year. So that's in the middle of page 71. So there's a lot of that kind of more detailed information all throughout the rest of the report. The smaller funds begin on pages 83 and 84, and there's budget to actual schedules for each one of those also. So anyway, that's my big picture summary for the main audit report. And then to jump into the other three reports, I'll just go ahead and talk about this one. This is a report on federal awards. When the city receives enough money to require a single audit, they're required to have this report. And there's a couple of reports in here similar to last year. There's a report on audit of the financial statements, or more description of what that is. The second letter is if there was any issues related to the actual federal programs themselves, we'd have to report that in here. And there were no findings related to the federal program. So that's good. The list of federal programs are on pages 6 and 7. And the top of page 7 then is the smaller ones on page 6, but on page 7 then is the larger program. It was about $2.8 million and that was the ARPA money, the first tranche of the ARPA money that the city received through June 30, 22. So total awards of around $3,087,000. And then let's see, then there's this report, summary report on page 8, and on page 9 is findings similar to last year. And so that is the report on federal awards. After that, then we have two more reports. One is a board report. It doesn't have it's a few extra pages. It's a general information about an audit, has a list of adjustments on the last several pages. If when the auditors have adjustments, they're required to report that to the board. So those are reported here. And then the last letter, it says at the top, communication of deficiencies in internal control. So these are other issues that we have to report to the board too, that are not significant enough to report in the other parts of the report. But just, let's see, I think there's only 10 of them. So just to briefly talk about each one, number 1 is related to tracking of grants. Number 2 is a list of outstanding receivables. Number 3 relates to the second review for department. Number 4 has to do with certain credit card amounts, transactions, additional documentation on that. Number 5 has to do with personnel documentation of overtime. Number 6 has to do with additional documentation in the accounting policies and procedures manual. Let's see, number 7 relates to reconciliations of receivables, and 8 for liability count reconciliations. And number 9 has to do with the allocation of the fleet maintenance internal service fund. And the last one then is related to the solid waste, the new item this year that we added to the report to address that deficit that's been increasing. So those are the 10 comments we had, and the summary of the audit report, the federal program reward of that, and then the annual comprehensive financial report. So happy to take any other questions or thoughts or comments on any of those.
Any questions of Mr. Williams? Mr. Clay?
Thank you, Mayor Crowe. Thank you for the presentation. Could you shed a little bit of light on the significant deficiency that you found, which is not a material weakness? As I understood it, it had to do with reporting certain financial statements or amounts on those statements. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I could read through it. There's a comment similar to what the cities had before and similar to what other cities have. There's a comment on page 9 of this report, the report on federal awards, and it's not uncommon to have a report like this. If the auditors have adjustments, that they put that in their report and they report that to the board. So it's it has to do with the audit and developing journal entries to record at the end of the year.
And for those who may be listening, if they hear or were to read this, they see significant deficiency. That doesn't sound particularly good, but can you put that in context for us and what that?
Yes, there is a definition of it. If you want me to read through it, it's on page, let's see here. It's on page 1 of the report on federal awards. Talks a little bit about what we do during the audit of the regular city audit, because what this report on page 1 is, it says at the top, independent auditors report on internal control over financial reporting. So when you do a report on federal awards, you're required to have this extra report in there. And what this report does, it's supposed to describe what auditors do related to the audit of the basic financial statements. Not the audit of the actual federal program itself. It's the rest of the audits that you do. So this is supposed to communicate what we do. And on this page, it says we've audited the financial statements, and that section talks about the report on internal control over financial reporting. And there's a paragraph related to that. And internal controls are things like policies and procedures and controls, things like that. And there's I guess I could read it. The bottom of page 1 says a deficiency on internal control exists when the design or operation of a control does not allow management or its employees in the normal course of performing their assigned functions to prevent, detect, or correct misstatements on a timely basis. A material weakness is a deficiency. Material weakness is a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies in internal control, that there is a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement of the statements will not be prevented, detected, or corrected on a timely basis. A significant deficiency is a deficiency or combination of deficiencies in internal control that is less severe than a material weakness, yet important enough that we think we ought to report it. So it's not a material weakness. The bigger item would be a material weakness. If there's something we think we have to report, and here we call it a significant deficiency and report it in this report, similar to prior years.
And I think what I wanted to illuminate is a significant deficiency is not as necessarily as bad as it sounds. It's very strong language.
Yeah, there's
but it
a
is
material weakness and a significant deficiency.
Yeah. Okay.
Without definition, if you look.
And we do have a remediation corrective action plan
Right.
that the city has articulated.
Correct.
Okay.
It's included in the report.
Anyone else? Mr. Williams, thank you very much.
Sure, happy to. Any questions, let us know. Thanks.
Thank you.
Honorable Mayor and council members, this next item asks that you consider approving Juneteenth as a University City holiday. If you recall, we had some very brief discussions about this over a year ago at this point. I have asked our Human Resources Director, Ms. Williams, to provide you with a very brief presentation on the rationale for the recommendation that I'm making, which is to actually add it as a University City holiday. Ms. Williams?
Evening. This will be fairly brief as soon as we get it up. Thank you. Might take less time than that. Thank you. Oh, this one, thank you. Okay. My name is Amy Williams. I'm the HR director for University City, and Juneteenth is the topic for, again, this very brief overview. Thank you, good sir. Okay. Juneteenth was signed into law as a federal holiday June 17th, 2021. Missouri followed suit and celebrated that year, and then quickly signed it into law that following year. Currently, just about half the states, 24, including Missouri plus the District of Columbia, recognize Juneteenth as a state holiday. All 50 states recognize it in some form or fashion with things like proclamations and celebrations throughout the country on that date. These are the cities that celebrate it and that don't celebrate it. A little bit behind this holiday, as you know, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. But when troops arrived in Galveston, they quickly realized that word had not spread to that area. And although news of the emancipation reached different areas at different times, the collective decision was to recognize June 19th, Juneteenth being a combination of those two, June and 19th, as the date of the emancipation when they did reach Galveston. And the very first celebration was that very next year in 1866. So these are the cities, like I said, that do and don't. These are what I think is even more telling, the number of holidays, including 8-hour shifts and including number of hours that our region celebrates. Total holidays. We have a lot of personal floating holidays. Some people call it the birthday holiday, a personal holiday, 2 to 3, sometimes personal holidays given. Some people do half days around Easter, half days around Christmas Eve, and some other religious holidays. And then U City has 9 total. We have the federal with 11 and state with 13 recognized holidays. And then I think the last slide is going to be just where it would fall in our University City holidays, right there in the middle, with a few on top and a few behind that, right here coming up here in a month or two. So happy to take any questions, field anything, but that is a pretty clear cut, just overview of Juneteenth.
Any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve? Motion made by Mr. Clay, seconded by Mr. Smotherson. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Mr. Rose.
Our mayor and council members, this next item, item L3, asks that you consider approving the housing consultant that is being recommended by both staff as well as the Housing and Third Ward Revitalization Task Force. And I believe that Ms. Smith, Brooke Smith, is here. Yes, to present this item. Ms. Smith.
Good evening. So as you all know, we had a joint session where both of our candidates presented their proposals to us for the housing consultant to assist the Third Ward Task Force in their revitalization strategy. After we had our meeting, we requested references. Of course, we requested a sample work product. Yard & Co. was the only one to respond with that information. The Beyond Housing sent me an email to reach out to someone else, but they did not forward their work plan, or I'm sorry, a work product. They said the document they submitted to the council that night was their work example, and I didn't get a copy of that. The task force discussed the proposals at length, and they voted, I believe, 8-1. One person was absent to recommend Yard & Co. They did put a caveat on there that only 60% of the funding come from the funds that are intended for the Third Ward. However, when we went back to talking Yard & Co., They said that their proposal was only for the third ward, that they did not submit the proposal with the intention of conducting a citywide housing strategy. So this entire amount that's listed in your packet is for the work that will be done in the third ward. So we are recommending that that be covered 100% by the funds intended for the third ward. And I can answer any questions or try to answer any questions you all may have.
Honorable Mayor, if I could just add on to Brooks' comments, the intention would be to have a separate agreement. If you approve this company with this company for the a citywide housing project. And so right now, I think that the focus that they would have and the bulk of the work in a housing program would occur in the third ward anyway.
Is there?
I'm recommending approval of this item.
Is there a motion to approve? Motion made by Mr. Clay. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Smothers. So we do have one citizen who would like to speak on this. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Patrick Fox.
Hello, my name is Patrick Fox. I live at 1309 Purdue in the third ward. I've been attending a lot of the third ward housing task force meetings, and they've been very productive. I will reiterate the same thing that I've told that commission on several occasions. I do not believe any of the initial $3 million should be used for the purposes of hiring a consultant. The figure presented here represents 8.5% of the total amount you have to date to spend on the third ward. Additionally, the attachment included with their proposal has a miscalculation of the profit that they built in. On line 3, they said the profit would be 20%, but when you multiply the figure, it's actually 25%. So that's about $6,000 over what their own math says it should be. I'll also add that I understand that a lot of the funds that are used from the TIF are once in a lifetime and that they need to be spent appropriately. So I recognize that saying that comment. Also, the city received $2.8 million of ARPA SLFRF funding. That is presented on your audited financial statements as an increase of your fund balance overall of, coincidentally, $2.8 million. As I see it, the city has the financial resources using another one-time revenue stream, and it would be an acceptable use using the revenue replacement method that you all elected to use the funds to hire the consultant using the ARPA funds and actually allocate the full $3 million to help the housing and third ward residents. So I would encourage you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rose.
Honorable Mayor and council members, I think it's important just to clarify that the funding that we received from the federal government, ARPA, has been fully exhausted. The last of it was allocated for the home buyout program that Dr. Wagner is working with FEMA and SEMA on. So while the numbers may seem similar, those are very different funds.
Any further discussion or questions by members of council? Mr. Clay.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Crowe. I recall that there was some conversation about the Yarden company in particular, and actually the other candidate, for lack of a better term, paring down their proposal to focus really sharply on the community engagement. There were some other things that Yarden Company had built in that I'm not saying are without value or without merit, but I thought there was a real emphasis on community engagement, which Yarden Company does, but it also does other things. Can either Ms. Smith or Mr. Rose speak to those deliberations and how the committee landed on embracing the full amount?
And we do have a representative that is on virtually from Yard and Co. I guess I should have led with that. So they can certainly answer any questions I'm unable to answer. My understanding is that there will be a lot of community engagement. They actually intend to hire individuals in the community that will conduct door-to-door surveys and whatnot. They will do the things that we just do not have the staff to do. And of course, the task force does not have the capacity to do themselves, as they are a volunteer task force. So my understanding is that there will be a lot of community engagement.
Okay.
And
so-
I can certainly, if you don't mind me stepping back, I can slide Ed over and he can maybe speak a little bit more to that. He should be on the call. I'll just go back.
Okay.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
I'm gonna turn the TV on for you all as well. So I will allow Ed to answer your question in more detail.
So can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Please begin.
All that waiting and then just to see my face. Yes, so thank you very much for the time. And we do anticipate doing a tremendous amount of outreach in the community. We just have finished a plan in a neighboring community of yours, the West End of St. Louis, the other half of the Del Mar Loop. And we ran a very successful ambassador program in the West End and Visitation Park, where we hired neighborhood residents to serve as captains and as leaders of this effort to help us achieve really robust engagement, neighbor to neighbor. We conducted that plan. It ran a little long. The pandemic really did really mess with the timing, but it ran for about 18 months. We're proposing a shorter time frame for your project, but we are still proposing an ambassador program. What we have discovered is that it really does empower neighborhood residents in ways that just listening to consultants and participating in charrettes really doesn't accomplish. When the West End Visitation Park plan was finally developed and it was time to present it to the community, Yard's role was simply to come and visit with our ambassadors, and the ambassadors themselves actually presented the plan to their neighbors. And it was a very powerful moment in that process. So we're very proud of the outreach that we do. It's something that we really hang our hat on, and we do a variety of methods, print surveys, online surveys. We go to where the people actually are. We don't believe in necessarily holding a meeting at a particular date, time, and place and expect people to come to us. We go out into the community where they already are going and solicit feedback that way. And then certainly the ambassadors, they host a lot of get-togethers. They do a lot of canvassing of the neighborhood and really encourage their neighbors to participate in the process. So it's been a great formula for us and one we look forward to putting to work for you.
Mr. Clay?
A couple other questions. Thank you for being present with us. The item itself does not have the cover sheet. Forgive me, I'm trying to turn to it now. The date is to it doesn't have a date of the engagement that I'm seeing. Perhaps I'm missing it. Is that correct?
Well, typically in our process, we go through a 3-step process that we called explore, test, and build. And the explore phase will typically take several months. In this case, we've allocated a couple of months to explore and a couple of months to test. And really what those 2 phases do are allow us to do the outreach to the community, to solicit their feedback. And the test phase of our process is where we come back to the community with ideas and concepts. Oftentimes we'll even do some tactical urbanism pop-up installations if that's warranted, depending on the type of project, and really allow us to test ideas in ways that maybe communities haven't seen, and really get some feedback from people about what's actually going to work on the ground. So we don't have any dates in there just yet. It's all contingent upon when we actually get approval to start this project. One of the very first things that we do is sit down with our client and we map out the exact project schedule. So, but you can readily assume that the first couple of months after we get started and set the schedule with Brooke, that we'll be doing engagement in the community for the first couple of months for sure.
If you had to estimate a time frame, 18 months was the West End.
Yeah.
If you had to estimate.
We've estimated our proposal about a 6-month proposal, a 6-month project, based upon the scope that was outlined in your RFP. So we're looking at about 6 months from the date that we get the signed contract and go ahead.
And my final question, Mayor Crowe, I'm assuming the answer to this is no, but the discrepancy that our citizen, Mr. Fox, pointed out, that would not necessarily impact the bottom line, I'm assuming, of the cost for the.
Oh, if we did make an error in our proposal, then we stand behind being accurate, and we would therefore make any correction to any error. If there was a math error and it happened to impact what we would take in on the bottom line, then we would correct that and take less. And so we would actually stand behind the math that should be there.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? No other questions or comments? I believe we have a motion already on the floor. All those in favor, am I correct, Ms. Reese? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Rose.
Honorable Mayor and council members, this next item L4, asks that you consider the proposed fiscal year 2023 through 2026 strategic work plan. This work plan was initially presented to you during your all-day work session on February the 25th of 2023 and modified based upon your comments and direction. I would ask to point your attention to page 7 of the proposal, where I have highlighted in blue report on architecture board. After further discussions with Dr. Wagner, we would like to marry this particular project with the update of the zoning codes, which will follow the update of the comprehensive plan. Dr. Wagner, I believe I'm presenting that accurately. Okay, perfect. We think that we will have the resources at that time to dedicate to this particular project.
Are there additional questions of the city manager after the work session we had on the 25th? And are you asking simply for acceptance or for
acceptance?
Is there a motion to accept the work plan? Motion made by Mr. Hales. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. McMahon. Is there additional discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Rose, L5.
Honorable Mayor and council members, this next item, item L5, asks that you consider the approval of the facade program. There were some questions, is the reason that I recommended moving it off of the consent agenda that I believe would be best responded to in the up under the city manager's report.
And remember, for those of you in the audience, L5 was K1, just in case you were following along.
I would be happy to respond to any questions that you have.
Mr. Smotherson.
Thank you, Mayor Crowe. Well, I'm not sure how I want to approach this because I could actually do it two ways, but I'm going to suggest the first thing, and that is I'd like to have the 8327 Olive, which is a vacant building, and also also 7301 Tulane Avenue removed, and for further discussion, especially if we're going to have a discussion with EDRST and actually proposing a different outlook for vacant buildings, because that concerns me. And then I'll speak personally with 8327 Olive, because of the number of years that building that I know of, trust me when I say, because I drive Olive every single day, and that building has been vacant. And I'm not sure I even understand why we would even supplement a vacant building. And in the plan that I could see, and I even opened the zip item and did not see any plans for what they were going to do next after that renovation. So that concerns me. And I'd like to actually have a discussion with EDRST and this council to establish a vacant building policy that makes sense, opposed to just having anybody with a vacant building apply. So, so again, if necessary, I'd like to make a motion to pull those two items from this list.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Klein. If I could just discuss for a minute, I think this probably wouldn't necessarily be a discussion with the EDRST as much as it probably would be with staff on guidelines. I think by the time it gets to the EDRST, it's sort of rolling along. I think that if I could suggest to my colleagues that pulling it, I don't think is any problem, but I think the discussion would probably be more appropriate with staff on guidelines. And frankly, if there was a vacant building and it was to be sold, then it would be a limitation to recoup the funds prior to any transfer of real estate. So I'm fine to pull the two off. I would just ask that if the second step, because really the only thing you're asking is to pull them off. That's the motion. The follow through, I think what I believe Mr. Rose would be most comfortable with, and probably staff, would be that staff comes up with a guidelines, if you will, on those properties.
Honorable Mayor, council members, if the direction, if you agree, my intention would be to have a study session, develop the guidelines, bring those to you in a study session for your consideration.
Hopefully we don't need an entire study session on that, but it could sure be an item during a study session. There's a motion and a second before us. Is there a discussion? Okay, the motion before you is simply to remove the two vacant properties. Mr. Clay was the second for Mr. Smotherson's. No, sorry, Ms. Klein. It was Ms. Klein. I apologize. Ms. Klein was the second, simply to remove the two items, and that's the first action. Then we would take the second action on those, on the remaining items. Is there any questions? Mr. Hales.
Under the current guidelines, are there any restrictions or limitations to applicants as to whether a property is vacant or not?
Nope. And by the way, I said no, but I have Brooke is the one that is saying no. I don't want to pretend like I'm an expert on this. Mr. Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to have a clarification. Someone here, and I think you said it, is that 7301 is not vacant. Is it a vacant property? Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, it says that on the application, and again,
that's.
You would know better. It says
I-
vacant.
I can't clarify one way or the other. I think we could go ahead and pull this.
Yeah,
We could
just
discuss it later.
so
Thank you.
it would only be a delay of 2 weeks anyway if we made a mistake. And I don't ever want to belittle that, but it would be 2 weeks. Those in favor of pulling the two properties that are vacant, as the motion was made by Councilmember Smotherson, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We had a nay. Mr. Hales. You now have before you item number L, and I apologize. I believe, Patrick, do you want to speak on this item as well, Mr. Fox? Okay, please come forward.
Hello, Patrick Fox, 1309 Purdue. I believe when I spoke to you last time about the facades, I'm glad to see there's all some further consideration of them. Again, it comes down to can versus should. I understand you have limited resources already. This seems to be $38,000 over budget, so being more intentional in the decision making makes sense. So those two removed, I totally understand exactly why they need further consideration. Still not sure why 6185 stays on. They already received EDRST funds, so perhaps limiting it to those that haven't received it as a first come, first served basis, but only being served once. And wanted to talk to you all about 6307 to 6309 Delmar. Now, I brought some concerns about mixed use, and Tulane was one of those properties. This also is one of those properties. 69.5% of this is zoned for commercial, not 100%. So a pro rata portion of the $15,000 max would seem to be appropriate in that case. This one also still has a very wide budget range between $28,500 and $53,500. So I will say this, I can only imagine what that range is now. That building is where Three Kings Public House is. So I'd like to also make you aware so you can consider possibly including insurance proceeds being excluded from the matching funds as you make your decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. You have before you the remaining items. Ms. Klein.
Oh, I just wanted to make one comment. My understanding is that we are going to be having this discussion on revisions to this policy. So we're approving these for now, but then in the future, there will be revised policies potentially.
Mr. Hales.
Thank you, Mayor Crowe. The Delmar property, 6307 through 6309, was the one on here that gave me the most concern because we kind of all have to see what transpires with the cleanup, the rebuild. And given the extensive request for potential tuck pointing, I think that request is probably impacted by whatever reconstruction may or may not be taking place. And so for me, if there's one to consider taking off, it would be this one to have a conversation as they go through the process post fire. So I'll go out on a limb and make a motion to delay consideration of 6307 and 6309 as well.
Staff good?
Yes, we're fine with that. I did want to point out that this is the first step in a process. As you may be aware, the next step would be to reach an agreement with each of these applicants, a contractual agreement with each of the applicants. If there are issues of concern regarding that application, it might be appropriate as well to simply bring that agreement to the council for consideration. That way we can ensure that we are including all of the conditions that you would like to have on that particular application because of the events that have occurred recently with the fire. So you can pull it or you could approve it and we would bring the contract back for your consideration.
There's a motion before us to remove items. I forget the address, 6307 to 6309 by Mr. Hales. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Fuller. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. So we pulled 3 pieces of property. We now have before us the rest of the list. Is there a motion to approve? Motion made by Mr. Smotherson. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Clay. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, so the next item we have 2 bills coming forward, 9509 and 9511. Prior to that, we need to go into closed session. So before I ask for the motion from my colleagues for closed session, I want to say to everybody who's primarily here, I think for probably Bill 9513, nothing gets voted on 9513 tonight. All it does is it gets introduced. There's no discussion. There is no conversation. There's nothing. We'd love for you guys to stay for the rest of the meeting, but there is no action being taken on 9513 tonight. It just gets introduced and then it goes at another meeting. The discussions occur. So we're probably going to be in executive session probably for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll be back. We'd love to have you stay, but just so you know, if you're staying for that item, there's really not going to be a conversation by council on that item. By protocol, it gets introduced tonight and then discussion and action is at a later date. So with that being said, I would welcome a motion to go into closed session according to Missouri Revised Statute 610.021, legal actions, causes of action, or litigation involving a public governmental body and any confidential or privileged communications between a public governmental body or its representatives or attorneys. Is there such a motion? Motion made by Mr. McMahon, seconded by Ms. Klein. Is there discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Klein.
Aye.
Councilmember McMahon.
Aye.
Councilmember Hales.
Aye.
Councilmember Fuller.
Aye.
Councilmember Smotherson. Councilmember Clay.
Aye.
Mayor Crowe.
Aye. Thank you very much. We'll be back as quickly as we can. Live? Welcome back, everybody. I apologize for any inconvenience. We have now before us Bill number 9509. May we have the second reading, Madam Clerk?
Bill 9509, an ordinance approving a parcel development agreement in connection with the Olive Boulevard Commercial Corridor and Residential Conservation Development Plan.
May we have the third reading?
Bill 9509, an ordinance approving a parcel development agreement in connection with the Olive Boulevard Commercial Corridor and Residential Conservation Development Plan.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve Bill number 9509? Motion made by Mr. Smotherson. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. McMahon. Is there discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on Bill number 9509?
Councilmember Hills.
Aye.
Councilmember Fuller.
Aye.
Councilmember Smotherson. Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Klein.
Aye.
Councilmember McMahon.
Aye.
Mayor Crowe.
Aye, the bill is passed. Bill number 9511. May we have the second reading?
Bill 9511, an ordinance authorizing the city of University City, Missouri to issue its taxable industrial revenue bonds, Dearborg's University City LLC project, Series 2023, in a principal amount of not to exceed 34 million for the purpose of providing funds to pay the cost of acquiring and constructing an industrial development project in the city and authorizing the city manager to enter into certain agreements and take certain other actions in connection with the issuance of bonds.
May we have the third reading?
Bill 9511, an ordinance authorizing the city of University City, Missouri to issue its taxable industrial revenue bonds, Dearborg's University City LLC project, Series 2023, in a principal amount of not to exceed 34 million for the purpose of providing funds to pay the cost of acquiring and constructing an industrial development project in the city and authorizing the city manager to enter into certain agreements and take certain other actions in connection with the issuance of the bonds.
Is there a motion to approve? Motion made by Mr. McMahon. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Smotherson. Is there discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on Bill number 9511?
Councilmember Fuller.
Aye.
Councilmember Smotherson.
Aye.
Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Klein.
Aye.
Councilmember McMahon.
Aye.
Councilmember Hales.
Aye.
Mayor Crowe.
Aye, the bill has passed. We'll now move to new business, Resolution 2023-08, acquisition and construction of a facility for an industrial development project. Is there a motion to approve? Motion made by Mr. Hales, seconded by Ms. Klein. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Resolution 2023-09, authorizing the execution of a contract with St. Louis County to house city municipal court prisoners. Is there a motion to approve? Motion made by Mr. McMahon. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Hales. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We'll now move forward to the introduction of bills for their first reading. Bill number 9512. Who would like to introduce? Ms. Klein introduces. Madam Clerk, may we have the first reading?
Bill 9512, an ordinance fixing the compensation to be paid to city officials and employees as enumerated herein from and after passage and repealing ordinance number 7186.
Thank you very much. Bill number 9513. Who would like to introduce? Bill number 9513. Who would like to introduce? Mr. McMahon, may we have the first reading, Madam Clerk?
Bill 9513, an ordinance amending sections 400.690 and 400.700 of the municipal code of the city of University City, Missouri, relating to conditional uses and density and dimensional regulations respectively, in the Public Activity District by amending section 400.690.A.12 relating to schools, private, and section 400.700.A.1 relating to minimum lot size.
Now I have before us bill number 9514. Who would like to introduce? Mr. Hales. Would you like to speak?
I would like to speak on this one. So this is a
Oh, I apologize.
first reading.
My guy over here to the left says I need to have the city clerk read it first. Madam Clerk, would you please read the bill?
Bill 9514, an ordinance amending Schedule 3, Table 3-D of the Traffic Code of the City of University City Municipal Code relating to residential permit parking areas by adding therein the south side of the 7,000 and 71,000, and the 7,100 blocks of Forsyth Boulevard, and clarifying the scope with respect to 7,000 and 7,200 blocks of Forsyth Boulevard.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Hales.
Thank you, Mayor Crowe. So I did want to speak on this. As many of you know, I served on the Traffic Commission for 5 years as a commissioner and 2 years as liaison. And the number one thing that the Traffic Commission during that time spent the most time on was residential permit parking. And so this issue came up, I think as many as 3 years ago, the first time. And my concern, first, I want to say, I do believe there is a need for a residential permit parking plan there. I do believe there is ample examples of commuter parking, and there currently is residential parking across the street. The concern I have is that the residential permit parking plan as it stands now was developed by the city attorney way back when for single-family homes around WashU's campus. And in a nutshell, once approved, each homeowner gets a sticker for every one of their cars that they have to be on the occupancy permit, and each home gets hang tags. Now, the south side of the street where the problem is, which does need to be fixed, primarily has multifamily. And the stickers don't have a date. They are nor do the visitor hang tags. And I'm concerned about the net effect of this. And I just want to read from the minutes of April of last year from the Traffic Commission. A resident on the north side, resident Tom Jennings, 7055 Forsyth, indicates he has 2 residential parking permits and 2 guest passes. This has not been working, and states the system has to be adjusted. And then Commissioner Moran indicated that the residential parking permit system needs to be revamped. I've spoken with Ms. Moran, and she was identifying the same problem. And so what I'm looking at is if this goes in as it stands right now, this will open up parking, particularly because many of the people who live in these apartment buildings are WashU students. And I can see there being all of these new hang tags that potentially change out yearly for there to be a market for them among students. And there's no differentiation under this plan between different parking areas. So someone could conceivably, you could have 8 students in a fourplex that next year you've got a new 8 students, but those 8 students still have the red sticker on their car, and they may take the hang tags, although there's no policy that determines how many hang tags an apartment would get, because that's not how the code was developed. And so you can kind of see where this is going. It opens them up to park anywhere in the city, and particularly on Forsyth, Northmore, Lindell, Maryland, and Westmoreland. The consequence of this right now, without the Traffic Commission revisiting this, is to really effectively undo the progress that has been made over, I think, like 30 years. So I would like to make a motion. I was happy to introduce it. I do agree with getting this done, but I'd like to make a motion that we send this back to the Traffic Commission to talk about some of the deficiencies in the plan, and talk about developing a different plan for multifamily where there are more controls, maybe have annual stickers so that the stickers can be kept track of, stickers being a different color, basically it being a different zone, similar to other communities that have different residential parking zones based on the nature of the circumstances of each. So that is my motion to send it back to Traffic Commission for those reasons. Thank you.
We have a motion before us to send this to the Traffic Commission, I believe. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. McMahon. May I suggest that if it's going back to the Traffic Commission, that it stops at the staff desk first so that staff can do a little bit of research on what other communities may be doing. So it's not just the Traffic Commission chiming in. Mr. Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When this was presented, I was on Traffic Commission at that point. I think as part of this discussion with staff, I'd like to, and it's not conveyed in the notes, that the police department and specifically Lieutenant Sean Whitley is our representative, has talked about that program having some adjustments that address the color code and that sort of thing already. So I don't want us to reinvent the wheel as it pertains in that discussion. That's my only comment. Thank you.
So we have before us a motion to send bill number 9514 back to the Traffic Commission. John, do I have to do, I don't have to do a roll call on this and just send it back? Or what do I? No, I didn't think so. Is there any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor of sending bill number 9514 back to Traffic Commission, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Bill number 9515, who would like to introduce? Mr. McMahon. Madam Clerk, may we have the first reading?
Bill 9515, an ordinance amending Schedule 3, Table 3-A of the Traffic Code of the University City Municipal Code relating to parking prohibited on certain streets during designated hours by adding therein the north side of Persian Avenue from Rossi Avenue to 325 feet to the west.
Thank you very much. We'll now move forward to council reports and business. Any reports from members of council? Hearing none, in the interest of time, I will move forward to item number 4, Council Rule number 38F. And the only reason I put this on here is I would really like for you to take an opportunity to maybe get back to me throughout the week. So maybe we can, the next couple of weeks, so we can put this on the agenda. But it seems to me that we have citizens who are serving on boards that never meet, and they're disqualified from other boards. And I thought about wordsmithing this and trying to find a way to just change it, but kind of, with all honesty, I think we just ought to eliminate the rule. I think we all know that we want to do what's best for our community. If someone serves on more than one commission, I think we're all smart enough to realize that if you're on the traffic or the park commission or the planning commission, you probably don't want to be on any other commission because they meet often and they meet long. But many of the other boards do not meet that often. They do not, some don't even meet but once a year. I don't think those folks should be disqualified from those boards. Since this has been, this is noticed up for a discussion, I will tell you that unless you have strong opinions, I'm willing to, I don't normally make motions, but I'd be willing to accept a motion to eliminate rule number 38F, but I'm in no rush. It's just, it doesn't seem to make sense. It's disqualifying folks who are on these onesies that can't serve on any other commission. Is there any discussion from folks? I was just kind of trying to clean this up. Mr. Smotherson.
Thank you, Mayor Crowe. With the statement that you just made, would it be more appropriate to actually include or exclude parks, planning, arts and letters, and those commissions that actually do meet and would it be appropriate to exclude those in your statement opposed to just eliminating this?
The only reply I would make is if I can find somebody who wants to be on parks and something else, I'd actually be happy. I just don't think they'll want to. I don't know that we have the necessity to exclude, because I think the reputation of those commissions is that they're a lot of work. And I would hope that we would all be saying it's not fair to that person to be on two. I don't know that we need to, I mean, by the way, I'm happy to do that, but I don't know that we have to overthink this because we all know which ones take the heavy lifting.
Right, okay.
And the IDA doesn't take too much, the EDRST doesn't take, and we can go through them all. The Civil Service Board hasn't met in quite some time, thank goodness, and all that. So any further, any discussion? And I'm happy to delay, or I'd welcome a motion to eliminate. I don't get to make motions. Hales.
Well, I agree. I think we know the commissions that don't. I would never envision putting, somebody who's on parks on something like plan or arts and letters. I think we all know how they work and how often they meet. So I would make the motion to eliminate Rule 38F.
Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Klein. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. And I do believe, we are going back, I believe, in the closed session. So are there there are no more citizen comments. Am I correct, Ms. Reese?
That's correct.
Are there any comments made by members of council at this time? Hearing none, I would welcome a motion to go into closed session according to Missouri Revised Statute 610.021, legal action, causes of action, litigation involving a public governmental body and any confidential privileged communication between that public governmental body or its representatives or attorneys. Is there such a motion? Motion made by Mr. Hales. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Fuller. Is there discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember McMahon.
Aye.
Councilmember Hales.
Aye.
Councilmember Fuller.
Aye.
Councilmember Smotherson. Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Klein. Mayor Crowe.
Aye. Thank you very much for coming this evening.